Going to Kenya. And it would be very easy to spend a lot of time talking about the experience of going to Kenya, but that was not the purpose of the trip. So today we want to talk about being able to go to countries and see in person how the work of the Canadian Foodgrains Bank plays out in the villages, in the communities. And we also got to interview and get stories from a number of the people who directly benefit from the programs. So I will start with scripture, reading from Isaiah, chapter 58, verses 10 to 12. And if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always and will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail.
Okay, we're doing team here today, so we're back and forth. So Canadian Foodgrains Bank is the organization we went with, and it's a Canadian organization. It's 40 years old, started by the Mennonites in 1983. There is 15 members of Canadian Foodgrains Bank, 15 denominations. It represents over 30 denominations in Canada. This is a miracle for 30 denominations to be able to work together in one process, but the goal is to end world hunger. And so this is what we went to see was work in action. And so the way that Canadian Foodgrains Bank helps people, the thing that you see, you picture most is emergency food assistance is where people are actually given food. But the long-term goal is to help people produce their own food, to overcome the challenges where they live. And the third goal is to engage Canadians like you and I to help keep this process moving on and keep the Canadian government is a big supporter in this process. So this is a map of the world. All the colored spots is where Canadian Foodgrains Bank. So there's a few here in Haiti and Central America. But the big area is Africa. Over here in Asia, and this is Ukraine up here, which is the breadbasket of the world. But because of war, there's one project going on in Ukraine. But we went to Kenya, which is here. The outstanding issue, it is Sudan, which is this country, I think, and there's been so many million people that's left Sudan because of the conflict that they went into South Sudan. And it's the most serious issue right now facing hunger issue in the world today. So the other thing, this is just the years 2005 to 2024, but since COVID, the number of people facing hunger has gone up, and it's not going down. As we'll point to the next one, the number one cause of hunger in the world is conflict. And whether it's Russia attacking Ukraine, or Israel attacking Gaza, or internal conflicts in Sudan, this is what causes the greatest amount of hunger in the world. But other causes are poverty and inequality, climate change, food system failures. And where we went, we saw the effects of climate change. The first community we went to, drought was a lot more common today than it was 50 years ago. So the Canadian Foodgrains Bank is a Christian response to hunger. And the big thing about Canadian Foodgrains Bank is today they have a partnership with the Government of Canada. And on most projects, you donate $1, the Canadian government tops it up with $3 more. So your dollar becomes $4 in most projects. One project we visited, it becomes 10 to 1 or more.
So this map gives you an idea of where we traveled in Kenya. So we landed in Nairobi, which is the capital. And then the first community that we visited was in the north, Marsabit. This is an area that is quite dry, and I would say it has a chronic level of drought. The droughts are happening more and more closely together. Then we traveled south to Embu. This is an elevated range, so the temperature is a little less hot, and the area is green and rolling and lush. And then we traveled south to Cfgb, which I would say is not as dry as Marsabit in the north, but they do still experience water issues. We were hosted by 3 different organizations. So Church World Services is supported in part by the Alongside Hope, which is the charitable arm of the Anglican Church of Canada. Then we worked with African Christian churches and schools. They are supported in part by the Canadian Baptist Ministries. And then the Utuni Development Organization is supported in part by the Mennonite Central Committee. And these and other organizations are who the Foodgrains Bank supports, so that these organizations can implement the programs that work directly with the communities. So now I want to talk about some of the programs that they implemented. And it seemed like chickens were a common thing to start to introduce to the groups. And that was because I think chickens were not necessarily part of the traditional livelihood of these groups. They were more likely to herd goats, cattle, camels, in other words, large animals. And it was a change for people to work with chickens. But you can see here the gentleman in the white is Simon Rentane, and he works with Church World Services, and he would go in and train. Every program begins with training on how to feed chickens, how to raise them, how to manage egg production and breeding and creating shelters to keep the animals safe from predators. Most of the programs are aimed at women, just because they are working more closely with the families. Because this area in Marsabit is actually a pastoralist society, traditionally. So it used to be that the villages would move with the herds of cattle. And now, due to the limitations of space and due to drought, that isn't an option anymore. But the herders will still move with the cattle up to 75 miles away and be gone for months, maybe many months. And that leaves women, children, and seniors at home. And that is just a recipe for food insecurity. So the gentleman here, Marawi Lasukuka, was just a joyful, vibrant person to meet. And he said that he was one of the first people to join the chicken program here in Marsabit because he had been to town and knew how important chickens could be. So the program trains you and then provides free chicks. So you get 2 female and 1 male chick. And from those 3 small chicks, he now has 9 chickens and enough eggs to feed his family, and he wants to continue to expand his flock. And as he said, when you have chickens, you always have a coin in your pocket. So the size of the herds can change. Chicken production was a common theme in all of the regions with all of the organizations that we worked with. And the herds can vary in size from just a few chickens with not much infrastructure to an enclosed building with some fencing and a little more infrastructure as built here by Francis Mutoya. And then there's Pauline. She was able to learn from the program, implement all of the steps of the program, and then go beyond the program. She studied on the internet to get more information, and now she raises chicks. So she buys day-old chicks, raises them for 2 to 3 weeks, and then sells them to other local farmers who raise chickens, who raise them on enough to go to market. And she went above and beyond the program. And my favorite quote of hers is, "I used to think about how am I going to get money. And now she says, I think, how am I going to get more customers?"
Okay, in the first community we went to, it was extremely dry, and all the programs try to diversify the people's livelihood and income, and when Shauna talked about chickens in the first community, that community would not even eat birds. Like, there was wild birds in that area. They wouldn't eat birds before the chickens were introduced to that area. But in that same area, but all the places we went, they were introducing bees. And this was a picture. I went to this bee. There was 4 hives in this tree, and they were 30 feet in the air, and it kind of dumbfounded me that. And we walked across. This is how dry it was. This was a riverbed. We walked across to get to the bees. There was no water in the river, and it actually had rained the day before. But they're in trees, not always as high. Some we've seen are only 10 feet high, but prevent theft from human people, but from the honey badger, which is an animal that likes to rob beehives. So that's why they were high up in the tree. So this is a tree. This is the same tree, and this is, the circles are showing. There's 3 hives, and there was actually a 4th hive in that tree, and it requires someone with a rope and a climber to go up and work on the hives. They check them once a month. Most of the hives, not all the hives in Kenya, are lime straw for the same style as what we use here, the square hives with removable frames. And the big difference is the hives are colonized by native bees. So they don't put bees in them like we do. They put the hive up and the bees come to them. And this was a walk across to the hive. That's how dry it is. That is a acacia tree, and those are thorns, what you see right here. Don't get close to them. So the acacia trees is one of the big sources of food for the bees. They flower in the dry season. So there's 2 wet seasons, one's wetter than another in Kenya, but in this area they were still in drought. But after the rainy season, the dry season comes, and these acacia trees come into flower. So the bees need water, but they didn't like to give them water too close, because then they wouldn't fly as far to get pollen. And the bees need to be fed sugar water when they take the honey away from them. And the bees cannot stand too hot of temperatures. So these are 2 beekeepers that we met that had beehives in this tree, and I don't even like to try to pronounce their names. Nakwana Carey is on the left, and Hararoy is on the right. But these were 2 women that had hives. So there, the hives produce about 4 kilograms of honey. Like, I don't know, here we try to get 100 pounds, but most people probably end up more like 50 pounds a year. And they don't harvest all the honey at once, and they sell their honey for 1,000 Kenyan shillings per kilogram, and I get mixed up, but 100 shillings is about the same as $1 Canadian. And they keep a little bit for personal use. They put some in their tea, and they feed it to their children.
So now, once the chickens and the beekeeping programs are both designed to improve food security and food nutrition for families, but then as people get better at production, they get to earn a little money. And for some of these people, it's new to earn money, have money, and manage money, especially for women in the more traditional cultures. So then the organizations start introducing the concept of village savings and loans. And this is based on the model of giving people micro loans. And this is a model that is used in many countries by many organizations. So again, the program would start with training to ensure that the VSLAs are able to sustain longer beyond the end of the program. And this is a village savings and loans meeting happening in Marsabit. And a VSLA is basically 25 to 30 people who can work together, and their village bank. And the bank is that metal box that you can see in the center. Many call it the village bank. So within that group, a number of people have specific jobs. So one person holds the box and keeps it at their home. 3 other people hold a key to the 3 padlocks that lock the box shut. And there's also might be a secretary and other people to help count the money. They cannot meet unless they have those 3 key holders present. So this is a VSLA meeting that we attended in Embu, and it was a very serious, quiet meeting. So first, and this is sort of a typical steps that they have during every meeting. First, the money in the box is counted in front of the whole group, and then each member might deposit money according to whatever the bylaws of their group is. And then, if someone wants to take a loan from the bank, they may do that, and knowing that there will be a 10% interest on each loan that they take. And that loan has to be paid back within 3 months. And then, the next step is anyone who wants to pay down on a loan that they've already taken can do that. And all the while, all of the members are watching each step. So each person has a record book where all of the transactions are recorded. And before VSLAs, if people needed money for school fees for their children, or for medical issues, or for foodstuffs, then they might have to go to a centralized bank. And it's sometimes a hardship to get to the bank. And of course, they weren't a supportive environment, and it wasn't a supportive experience. So this VSLA model encourages saving money. It encourages managing loans and understanding the impact and paying them back. And it also encourages this group to work together locally. And then, at the end of the year, any money in the box is completely paid out to the members according to the shares that they have in the bank. And the process starts all over again for another year. So, just in the Embu area, the group that you saw seated there are about 35 different VSLAs with about 30 people per VSLA. And together, they have a combined savings over 12 million Kenyan shillings, which is about 120,000 Canadian dollars. And the beauty of this is that they grow their fund by collecting the interest. But the interest, at the end of the day, benefits them all.
So I'm going to talk about Nature Plus, or Nature Positive Food Systems for Climate Change. And this is a program that the Canadian government strongly supported as part of their Paris Accord, or part of their climate change adaptation. So this program was funded to a higher degree than most Canadian Foodgrains projects. So the goal is to restore degraded landscapes, enable communities to improve their livelihood. And it went from April 2023 and it goes to March 2027, where we went was actually finished. But it's in 4 countries: Ethiopia, Kenya where we were, Mozambique along the coast, and Zimbabwe. And there were 75,000 participants, half of them were women. And all the programs we went to women were always encouraged to partake in the programs. So there's 9 of the 15 Foodgrains churches that participated, and the United Church is in that group of 9. And here's a couple of shirts we saw. Nature at Heart, Food for All. That's kind of the goal of Nature Plus. You can't get much better than that. The other one says, Save Earth, Grow a Tree. These are the people that we've met in our travels. So there's 4 goals: conservation agriculture, farmer-assisted natural regeneration, improved water management, and improved livestock and rangeland management. So we saw more of the conservation agriculture, which wants minimize soil disturbance, increase soil cover, and crop diversity. So these are 2 places we went. This one here is Leah. And this was a patch of maize or corn to our left, and she was taking the stalks, and she was at harvest, was cutting that top half off and feeding to her livestock, and the bottom half she was putting back as a soil cover. And on the right is another lady we visited, and this is actually sorghum instead of maize, but she was putting her stalks back down as a soil cover. And part of the assisted or farmer-assisted natural regeneration, they planted 4 million trees were planted. Actually, there was 4,000,001 trees planted. Shauna and I planted a tree while we're there. We actually have planted a few trees, but this tree we planted totally ourselves. And this was in an area that was a conservation area. So soil and water conservation, they took us to a spot where we could see these terraces, but it was a steep climb and we didn't go up to see. We saw some little terraces in some gardens, and on the right they're building side pits. And I'll get to side pits. This is half moons. A half moon is 20 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and it's so the water runs downhill and catches the water. So this is, in the rainy season, they're full of water. This is side pits that we built, we didn't build, we saw. This is a side pit. This was one year before. This was bare ground, like the carpet on this floor. They dug the pits, they seeded with natural grasses, and that's what it looked like. It's starting to green up with that much within 1 year after the half moon was dug. Now a side pit is 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet deep. So you dig a hole, it's a lot of work to make it. And then in the bottom foot, you put back topsoil and compost, and then you plant, usually in the center they plant corn, maize, or corn, or sorghum, a fairly dry resistant plant, and then in the corners you plant peas or beans, something that will shade the soil so it doesn't dry out as quick. But the whole idea is water harvesting. When it rains, the water is into that pit, and then the plants are able to use it after the rain is gone. And this, you can't see very well, but this is a woman who listed, Joyce McCready, and these are side pits that it was just coming into the rainy season. She was planting, but there was nothing growing there. There was the odd sorghum plant that was regrowing where she had sorghum the previous year. So the other part, or another part of Nature Plus is improving livelihoods. So Shauna's talked about VSLA, which is microbanks or microloans that people to buy seeds or to pay school fees, and training capacity to people to improve their livelihoods. So the picture Shauna had of Francis Mutuni, this is rocket stoves that they had in one of their outbuildings, and these are about 10% as much wood to cook with as a regular stove does, regular fire does, and so it's a big savings on wood and gathering wood. Pillar 3, governance and empowerment. Empowerment for women is the big thing. And this is a couple we visited. The man on the left is Francis Mutui, and he is blind. He was blind in 2003 from high blood pressure, but he is a gender champion in his area. And this is a picture of their place, and this is a year ago where they actually have another building. This is their house. This is their chicken building, I think, and then they have another building. They've only been in this property for 2 years, and they built these buildings. And they're farming 2 or 3 acres there. He says they have, because he's blind, he can't do enough work, they have to hire people to help him. And this is a visioning board, and this is where they intend to be in 5 years. More things down here. This is an elephant. An elephant is a risk to them, that elephants destroy crops, destroy buildings, and they actually have to move elephants, repopulate them, because they do so much damage. So this is the big thing, and you have to remember this is part of the Paris Accord. Nature Plus program is financed with $35.6 million from Local Affairs Canada and $1.5 million from people like you that donate to Canadian Foodgrains Bank. My vision of Kenya is this yellow water jug. Now this one is that we were access where we're planting trees, that was full, but these 20-liter yellow water jugs are what we saw everywhere. People carry them on donkeys, on buses, on motorbikes. This is how people that did not have running water got their water. They filled these 20-liter jugs. We met a family that had 4 or 5 donkeys. They had harness on the donkey and the haul, and they were walking 15 kilometers each way that day to get water. And that's kind of the discouraging part, that without water, food security doesn't really kick in. You need water first. And the government is supposed to be helping with water, but neglects their job. Now, we had our tour in Kenya was organized by CWS, Church World Service. And this was my driver, Isaac. We had 4 drivers. They took us around. They lined up all the accommodations and everything. This was the best that CWS drivers had. And I kept hitting Isaac and said, I want your vest, Isaac. And he finally got married to give me a vest.
So if you would like to support Canadian Foodgrains Bank and other organizations that help fight food insecurity, there are several ways that you can do that. And one, of course, is to make a donation. And this can help with both short-term food assistance and also helping with long-term development like the programs that we've described today. Also, you can pray for places like Sudan, South Sudan, Gaza, Syria, and others, where there are places of conflict. And also you can advocate. So like Charlie and I are doing here today, you can tell the stories, share the stories about these experiences with your neighbors, but also with government, to encourage them as the Canadian government to continue to support increasing food security. And you can continue to learn about ways to fight food insecurity. And if you want to be more proactive, there is a postcard campaign. And this is a way of expressing encouragement to the Government of Canada to continue to provide funds and aid to end hunger, and to prioritize support for agriculture systems around the world. So this card is postage free, don't have to add a stamp. There is a message on there already, and it's already addressed to the Office of the Secretary of State for International Development, the arm of Canada that works with this kind of project. And all you would need to do is add your name and sign and your address. And there are some at the back of the church if you would like to consider doing that. And an independent assessment of charities across Canada has included the Canadian Foodgrains Bank as one of the top 10 impact charities for the last 8 years. And what that means is CFGB uses the funds that you give them effectively and efficiently, and with only a small percentage going toward administration. So you can be sure that your contributions, your donations, are doing good work. And at this point, I want to acknowledge that the Canadian Foodgrains Bank did support our trip to Kenya, as well the United Church of Canada supported our trip. So as you can see, hopefully, what we saw on this trip was that small changes in a person's life can have a big impact. And each of the programs actually feeds one into the other and supports the next. So chickens and bees can improve a family's food security and health through nutrition, and while empowering women. And then once financial gain kicks in, then the VSLA model can help improve money management and help them expand their agriculture practices. And then when you add in the environment aspect, then it helps everything. It ties everything together. It improves water security, it improves food production and empowerment, and it actually draws the community together. So just as God said when he looked at all of creation, together it is very good.